The call came at 2 in the morning. Cole Whitfield hadn't slept. 6 months since the divorce, and the silence in that house still had weight, the kind that pressed down on your chest every time you walked past a room that used to have noise in it. He picked up on the second ring. A hospital. A woman, critical condition, premature labor, no next of kin on file. Sir, she named you as the father. Cole froze. Serena, his ex-wife, the woman who had shattered everything he thought he knew about loyalty. The woman carrying another man's child. His jaw tightened. Why him after everything? Why his name, Cole Whitfield, was not a man people described as warm? His own assistant had once said carefully that he was efficient with his emotions, which was the professional way of saying he kept them filed away somewhere no one was allowed to look. At 44, he ran Whitfield Group, one of the largest real estate development firms on the East Coast, with the kind of precision that made competitors nervous and shareholders very, very comfortable. He wore that reputation the way other men wore expensive suits, deliberately and without apology. What the quarterly reports didn't show, and what very few people actually knew, was that every evening at 6:15, Cole Whitfield was on the floor of his daughter's bedroom, helping a 6-year-old build the same Lego castle they had been building and rebuilding for 3 months, because Ava kept changing what she wanted the towers to look like, and he had never once told her to just pick one and stick with it. Ava was the one thing from his marriage that hadn't left him feeling like a fool. She had her mother's bone structure and his stubbornness, and she had taken the divorce with the quiet gravity of a child who understood more than she was supposed to. She didn't cry much. She asked questions instead, precise, patient questions that sometimes landed harder than tears would have. In the weeks after Serena moved out, Ava had walked through the house with her hands clasped behind her back, inspecting each room like she was taking inventory. She stopped in the doorway of the master bedroom and looked up at Cole. "Is it going to be just us now?" she had asked. Cole had said yes. Ava had nodded slowly and then asked if they could get a dog. Cole had said he'd think about it, which was the kind of answer that meant he was already looking up breeders. The divorce had not been clean. Nothing involving Serena Hale ever was. Cole had discovered the affair through the most ordinary of circumstances. A phone left unlocked on the kitchen counter, a name he recognized appearing in a thread that no married person has any business keeping. The name belonged to Derek Voss, a man Cole had brought into a joint development deal 2 years prior and trusted with contracts worth 8 figures. He hadn't confronted either of them with noise. He had walked into the living room where Serena was sitting, set the phone face up on the coffee table between them, and waited. She had looked at the screen, then at him, and the first thing she said wasn't an apology. It was, "You were never really home anyway." Cole had picked up the phone, called his attorney, and filed the papers the following morning. 7 years of marriage, and it ended with a sentence that didn't even have the decency to be true. 6 months later, he had a routine. Ava to school by 7:45, office by 8:30, home by 6, dinner together, Lego castle bedtime story. He had learned which brand of mac and cheese Ava would actually eat, versus which ones she pushed around the bowl out of politeness. He had learned that she preferred her hair in 2 braids rather than 1, and that she slept better with the hallway light left on, and that she was currently working through a phase of asking impossibly large questions right before bed, the kind about whether stars could see them back, and whether dogs dreamed in color, and whether a house could miss the people who used to live in it. Cole answered everyone as honestly as he could, including the last one. He told her he thought it probably could. Ava had considered that for a moment, then said, "Then I feel bad for houses." He had turned off her lamp and stood in the hallway for a long moment, after that, not quite ready to go back downstairs to the quiet. That was the life Cole had built. Controlled, functional, moving forward. And then the phone rang at 2 in the morning, and the voice on the other end said the name Serena, and said premature, and said she named you. And Cole was already reaching for his car keys before the sentence was finished. St. Mary's Hospital was 40 minutes from his house. At that hour, the highway empty and lit orange under the street lamps. Cole drove with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. He had no plan. He had no idea what he was going to do when he got there, or what he would say, or what any of this was supposed to mean. He only knew that a person does not ignore a call like that, even if the person attached to it had given him every reason to. The attending physician met him at the entrance to the maternity ward, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and the flat, careful tone of someone who had delivered bad news so many times it had become a kind of professional fluency. She explained Serena had come in alone 6 weeks early, no emergency contact listed except his name and number. She had gone into labor quickly, hemorrhaged severely, and was now in the ICU unconscious stable for the moment, but the situation was still critical. The baby had been delivered. A girl. She was in the NICU, premature, but breathing, and she needed a surgical procedure within the next 2 hours. Without a family member's signature, they could not proceed. Cole stood at the window of the NICU and looked at the baby through the glass. She was impossibly small, the kind of small that makes the human body seem like a fragile, implausible thing. She lay in the incubator with tubes and monitors attached her chest, rising and falling in rapid, shallow movements, her hands curled into fists the size of walnuts. She had dark hair, the faintest suggestion of it, matted flat against her head. She was not his. He knew that. Every rational, clear-eyed part of him knew that. He was standing in a hospital in the middle of the night, looking at the infant daughter of his ex-wife and the man who had helped destroy his marriage, and he had absolutely no obligation to sign anything. He stood there for a long time. The baby's chest kept rising and falling. The monitor beside her beeped in a steady, patient rhythm, as if it were waiting for him to make up his mind. Cole asked the nurse for a pen. He signed the form. He did not look at the line that said, "Relationship to patient." He stayed until the procedure was complete, and the doctor came out and said she had come through well. Then he sat in a chair in the hallway outside the NICU and did not move for the better part of an hour. He called no one. He texted his housekeeper to let her know he would be late and that Ava should not be told anything yet. Then he sat with his elbows on his knees and his hands folded and stared at the floor, trying to figure out what exactly he had just committed himself to and whether he had any intention of finding out. He came back the next morning, and the one after that. He told himself it was because someone had to. Serena remained in the ICU, drifting in and out of consciousness, not yet strong enough for a real conversation. The baby the nurses had taken to calling her the little fighter, which was both touching and imprecise. As Cole had observed, she mostly slept, had no one else checking on her. His attorney called twice that week and asked what his plan was. Cole said he didn't have one yet. His attorney, who had known him for 11 years, recognized the particular silence that followed and decided not to push. Cole visited the NICU each morning before the office and each evening before he drove home. He sat beside the incubator. He did not try to explain to himself why. The complication arrived in the form of Derek Voss, who showed up at Cole's office on a Tuesday afternoon in a suit that cost too much and with a lawyer Cole didn't recognize. Derek had always moved through rooms with the particular confidence of someone who had never once been held accountable for anything, and he wore it now, the easy posture, the unhurried eye contact, the slight smile that stopped just short of smug. He wanted his lawyer explained to establish his legal rights regarding the child. He was the biological father. He was prepared to pursue full custody. He wanted it on record that Cole Whitfield had no standing in this matter and should remove himself accordingly. Cole looked at Derek Voss for a long moment. He thought about 7 years. He thought about signed contracts and shared conference rooms and a handshake he had met, and the other man hadn't. Then he told his own attorney quietly, without heat, to begin preparing a response. After Derek left, Cole stood at his office window for a long time, looking down at the street below, where the city went about its business, completely indifferent to the fact that something had just shifted in a direction he hadn't expected. When Ava found out, it was not because anyone told her. It was because she overheard Cole on the phone one evening, standing in the kitchen speaking in that low, deliberate tone he used when he wanted the conversation to stay contained. She appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, with her hair half out of one braid, and she waited until he had hung up before she spoke. "Is the baby okay?" she asked. Cole turned around, recalibrated, and told her the truth. In the simplest version he had, there was a baby at the hospital. Her name was Ellie. She had been born early. She was getting stronger. Ava took this in with the same systematic patience she applied to most new information. Then she asked if she could see her. Cole said he would think about it. Ava said, "You always say that when the answer is yes, but you need more time." He did not correct her because she was right, and she was 6, and it was 9 o'clock on a school night, and he was not remotely prepared for how precisely she had just read him. He brought Ava to the hospital on a Saturday. She stood at the NICU window, with her nose almost touching the glass, her hands pressed flat against the surface, and she looked at Ellie for a long time without saying anything. Then she turned to Cole and said, "She's really small." Cole agreed. Ava pressed her nose back to the glass. "Is she scared?" she asked. Cole thought about how to answer that. "I think she's working hard," he said. Ava nodded, satisfied with that, and stood there a while longer. On the drive home, she was quiet in the back seat, the kind of quiet that meant she was building something in her head, organizing it, deciding where things went. Just before they pulled into the driveway, she said, "I don't think she should be by herself." Cole put the car in park and sat there a second. "No," he said. "I don't think so either." Serena was awake by the end of the 3rd week. Cole went to see her on a gray Wednesday afternoon, when the corridors of the hospital had that particular midweek stillness, the hum of the building, the low murmur of televisions behind closed doors, the smell of antiseptic and institutional coffee. She was sitting up in the bed, thinner than he remembered the usual precision of her appearance, reduced to a hospital gown, and no makeup and hair that had been brushed, but not styled. She looked for the first time since he had known her like someone who had run out of performance. She looked like a person. Cole pulled a chair to the side of the bed and sat down. He did not begin with pleasantries. "Why my name?" he said. Serena looked at him steadily. She had clearly been preparing for this conversation, but she didn't reach for deflection or polish. She told him plainly when she refused to end the pregnancy. At Derek's insistence, he had withdrawn completely. No calls, no money, a message through his attorney denying paternity. She had gone through the last months alone, and as the pregnancy became more complicated, she had started thinking about what would happen if something went wrong. She had no one she trusted. Her father, Richard Hale, was a man who treated every situation as a negotiation and every person as an asset or a liability. She had grown up knowing that about him, and she had spent years pretending otherwise. She was not going to let Ellie anywhere near that calculation. So she wrote down the one name she was certain of, not because she had any right to, not because she expected anything, but because in 7 years of marriage, whatever else Cole had been, he had never once walked away from something that needed him. She had counted on that. She knew it wasn't fair. She wasn't asking him to say it was. Cole sat with that for a moment. Then he stood up, pushed the chair back, and walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. "She's doing better," he said. "Ellie, she's eating on her own now." He left before Serena could answer. The custody filing landed 3 weeks later. Derek Voss, through his attorney, argued that as the biological father, he had an inherent legal claim that superseded any arrangement Cole had informally established. The argument was not without merit, technically, and Cole's legal team was honest with him about that. What the law cared about was biology and documentation, and Derek had one and could produce the other. What the law did not particularly care about was who had been there at 2 in the morning, or who had signed the form, or who visited every day, or who had a 6-year-old who had started drawing pictures of 2 kids playing together and leaving them on the kitchen counter without comment. Cole threw himself into the legal preparation depositions documentation, a forensic review of Derek Voss's financial history that turned out to be its own separate education in creative accounting. He was thorough, and he was relentless, and he told no one at the office what was happening, and he arrived home each evening at 6, made dinner, sat on the floor, with Ava and Ellie's incubator photographs spread around them, and answered every question Ava asked about how small babies get strong. The temporary ruling came down on a Thursday. Derek Voss was granted interim custody pending the full hearing. Ellie would be transferred to a care arrangement coordinated by Derek's household within 48 hours. Cole's attorney called him at the office and delivered the information in the careful, neutral tone of someone bracing for an explosion. Cole said very little. He thanked her. He ended the call. He sat at his desk and looked at the city through the floor-to-ceiling glass and felt something in his chest contract in a way that wasn't anger exactly, though it was adjacent to it. It was the particular sensation of watching something slip out of your hands and knowing that this time you cannot simply write a larger check. He drove to the hospital that evening. He sat beside Ellie's incubator and put his finger against the glass of it. She was awake, which she rarely was, her dark eyes unfocused and wandering the way newborns' eyes do when they are still learning that the world has things in it worth looking at. She turned her head slightly toward him. He did not tell himself it was intentional, but he did not look away. He had to tell Ava. He had promised himself he would always be honest with her about the things that mattered, even when honesty was inconvenient, even when the easier thing would be to manage the information into a softer shape. He sat on the edge of her bed that night after her story and told her simply that a judge had decided Ellie needed to go somewhere else for a while. Ava looked at him. "Why, no," she asked. Cole explained the law simplified, but not dishonest, that a rule said the person Ellie was related to by blood had to be tried first. Ava was quiet for a moment, her hands folded over her blanket the way she had recently started doing when she was processing something. "But we know her," she said. Cole said yes. "Does the judge know we know her?" Cole said the judge knew the relevant facts. Ava's expression did exactly what his did when she didn't accept an answer, but had decided to hold her objection for now. She turned on her side. Then just before he stood to leave, "Ba would never just leave a baby somewhere." She meant it as a statement of fact. Cole sat back down and stayed until she was asleep. Ellie left on a Saturday morning. The handoff was clinical, attended by a social services coordinator and Derek's housekeeper, a woman who looked like she would rather be anywhere else, and one of Derek's attorneys. Derek himself was not present. Cole stood in the corridor after and did not move for a long time. The hospital felt different with her gone, which was irrational given how many other patients were there. But the absence had a specific shape to it, and he recognized it, and he drove home in the quiet and sat in the kitchen with a cold cup of coffee, and did not answer the 3 work emails he could see on his phone screen. It was Ava who broke the stillness. She came downstairs in the early afternoon, climbed onto the stool across the kitchen island, and watched him for a moment with the particular patience of a child who has something to say and is deciding how to say it. "Can we go see her?" she asked. Cole looked up. "Not right now," he said. Ava considered this. Then, but eventually, Cole looked at his daughter, the way she sat with her hands folded the way she was watching him with those careful, steady eyes, and he made himself a promise he hadn't quite put into words before. "Yeah," he said. "Eventually." What changed things was not a legal strategy. It was a phone call, and before that, a baby who would not stop crying. Derek Voss had no instinct for children and no patience for acquiring one. Within 2 weeks of Ellie's arrival in his household, the housekeeper he had hired to manage everything had turned over twice, and the pediatrician he'd contracted was raising concerns about the baby's weight and stress levels. Ellie was not eating well. She was sleeping in short, distressed bursts. She cried in a specific, exhausted way that the nurses had sent. Mary's would have recognized immediately the sound of an infant whose nervous system had not yet developed enough to self-regulate, who needed consistency and proximity and calm and was not getting any of it. Derek, to his credit, made the calls he knew how to make. He hired specialists. He brought in a night nurse with impressive credentials. None of it worked because none of it was the thing she was missing, and the thing she was missing was not something you could staff. Serena had been discharged by then and was staying in a rental in the city, working through her own recovery with the methodical, slightly grim determination of someone who has decided that falling apart is no longer an option. She heard from the pediatrician she had insisted on remaining on the medical contact list, and she went to see Ellie without asking Derek's permission. She walked into that house and picked up her daughter, and Ellie went quiet almost immediately, the way infants do when the specific smell and heartbeat they have known longest comes back into range. Serena stood in Derek Voss's immaculate living room, holding a baby who had finally stopped crying, and she called Cole. She did not ask him how he was. She did not explain herself at length. She just said, "Ellie needs to go home, Cole. You know where that is." Cole drove to Derek's house alone. He had told his attorney where he was going and left her with strict instructions to stay on the phone if he needed her, but he walked up to the front door without backup, without theatrics, without the particular armor of men who have decided to win something. Derek opened the door himself, which was unexpected, and they stood in the entry of a house that smelled of expensive cleaning products and not much else, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Cole was not there to argue. He looked at the man across from him, the easy posture slightly less easy than it used to be, the unhurried confidence replaced by something that looked very much like the expression of someone who had acquired a problem they didn't know how to solve. Cole said, "I'm not going to make a speech. I'm just going to ask you one question." Derek waited. "When you look at her," Cole said, "what do you see?" The silence that followed was long enough to be its own answer. Derek Voss looked at the floor. Then he looked somewhere past Cole's shoulder, out toward the street the way people do when they are finally being honest with themselves about something they have been avoiding. He was a man who was good at acquisition and very bad at stewardship. He had understood that about himself in other contexts, business relationships, a house he had once bought and never lived in. He understood it now in this context, in a way he could not argue himself out of. He didn't say much. He said, "She deserves better than what I can give her." Cole said nothing. He waited another moment. Then Derek Voss stepped back from the door, and Cole walked in, and Serena was standing in the living room with Ellie against her shoulder, and when Cole came into her line of sight, Ellie turned her head toward him with the slow, deliberate attention of an infant who has recognized a sound she has heard before. Serena held out her daughter. Cole took her. He held Ellie against his chest, and she tucked her head under his jaw, the way she had learned to do, and her breathing slowed, and the room was very quiet, and Serena looked at the wall and pressed her lips together and didn't say a word. The paperwork took another 3 weeks and involved more attorneys than Cole would have preferred, but Derek Voss, having made his decision, did not reverse it. He withdrew the custody petition without fanfare. There was no dramatic confrontation, no courtroom moment, no audience for any of it, just signatures and process, and the particular bureaucratic pace of systems designed to protect children slowly arriving at the outcome it should have arrived at, sooner. Cole did not celebrate. He drove home with Ellie in the car seat Ava had spent an entire afternoon figuring out how to properly install, and he parked in the driveway and sat for a moment in the quiet before going in. Ava was waiting by the window. She had heard the car. By the time Cole came through the front door with Ellie in the carrier, Ava was already there, barefoot on the hardwood ice, wide hands pressed together in front of her, like she was trying to contain something that was too big for the size of her. Cole crouched down so she was level with the carrier. Ava leaned in slowly the way she had learned to do around Ellie. No sudden movements, no loud sounds, all the restraint of a 6-year-old who has decided that some things are worth being careful about. Ellie's eyes found Ava's face. Ava let out a breath that had been held for weeks. "Hi," she whispered. "We came and got you." Cole stood up. He did not say anything. He looked at his daughter, talking to the baby in her carrier. Two voices in a house that had been too quiet for too long, and he walked to the kitchen and stood at the counter with his hand flat against the surface, and breathed. In the weeks that followed, the house settled into something that had not existed in it before, not the controlled, efficient silence of a man managing a household on his own, and not the particular tension that had lived in the walls when the marriage was still technically intact. Something else. Noisier. Less organized. Ava had opinions about Ellie's schedule and communicated them with the confidence of someone who had done research, which she had in fact done. She had borrowed 2 books from the school library about babies and read them with the same focus she applied to things she had decided mattered. Cole learned the particular rhythm of an infant who was still catching up, the way feeding times shifted the way a baby, who had started her life fighting for every breath, slowly, incrementally, began to simply exist without effort. He was tired in a way he hadn't been since Ava was born. He was also, though he would not have said this out loud to anyone, less lonely than he had been in years. Serena came on a Thursday the 2nd week, and then again the following Tuesday, and then she simply started coming every few days at times that had not been formally arranged, but had established themselves anyway, the way some things do. She and Ava had found their way into a tentative, careful version of something they talked about Ellie mostly, and then sometimes about Ava's Lego castle, and once about a book Ava was reading that Serena had also read as a child. Cole did not involve himself in those conversations. He watched from the other side of the room and let them find their own footing, which they were doing in the slow and non-linear way that trust actually rebuilds when no one is forcing it. He and Serena spoke directly only about logistics. Ellie's next appointment, the pediatrician's notes, the particular formula she had finally agreed to take without complaint. The conversations were short. They were not unkind. Cole did not know what they were building, if they were building anything, and he had decided that he did not need to know yet. Some things need to be lived before they can be named. One evening in late October, with the light going early the way it does when the season turns, Cole was in the kitchen when he heard the living room without the sound of anyone managing it. He stood in the doorway. Serena was on the floor with her back against the couch, Ellie in her lap, playing with the baby's fingers, with the kind of concentrated attention that needed no audience. Ava was cross-legged beside them, explaining with great seriousness her architectural plans for the Lego tower she had been redesigning for the past 2 weeks. Ellie, who could not possibly understand any of it, was watching Ava's face with the complete devoted attention that babies give to voices they have decided they love. The lamp in the corner was on. The room smelled of dinner still faintly in the air. Cole stood there and did not announce himself, and did not move, because there are some things you do not want to interrupt. He thought about Ava's question from months ago, the one she had asked walking through a house that had just had someone leave it, the one about whether anything was missing. He thought he finally had the answer, but not the one he would have given her then. What had been missing wasn't a person. It was this specific quality of evening, the kind that doesn't ask anything of you, the kind where everyone in the room is simply there, without agenda, without score. He had not realized how much he had wanted it until it was already happening. Ellie noticed him first. She turned her head toward the doorway with that slow, deliberate attention, and when she found Cole's face, she did the thing she had started doing recently. A full-body response, her arms moving, her expression shifting into something that was not quite a smile yet, but was its clear antecedent. Ava looked up. "Bah, come sit down," she said, with the mild authority of someone who has been wondering when he was going to stop hovering. Serena looked up too briefly and said nothing, but she shifted slightly to make room. Cole walked in. He lowered himself to the floor, cross-legged close enough that Ellie could see him clearly. Ava immediately resumed her architectural briefing. Ellie's gaze moved between the two of them, like she was following a conversation she was almost old enough to join. Cole sat with his hands loose in his lap and looked at his daughter, and the baby, and the woman across from him, and he let the evening simply be what it was. Outside, the first real cold of autumn had settled in. Inside, the lamp was warm, and Ava was explaining load-bearing walls to an infant, and Ellie was listening like it was the most important information she had ever received. It was enough. It was, in fact, more than enough. Some families are planned down to the last detail. Some are built in the margins in the decisions made at 2 in the morning, in the chairs sat in outside hospital rooms, in the questions a 6-year-old asks before bed. Cole Whitfield had spent 44 years believing that the best outcomes were the ones he had engineered. What he understood now, sitting on the floor of his own living room in the quiet of an ordinary Thursday evening, was that the best thing that had happened to him in years was something he had not planned at all. He had only said yes once to a form in a hallway because a child needed someone to. Everything else had followed from that. Everything else always does.